I'll never forget the day I first saw Sango. He wasn't a god then, not yet. He was just a boy, but even then, there was something different about him. Something powerful. It was the day he lost control, and everything changed. We lived in Oyo, a great kingdom with tall walls and bustling markets. My father worked for the royal family, so I often played near the palace with other children. That day, we were chasing each other around the courtyard when a loud crash stopped us in our tracks. The sound came from inside the palace. My heart raced as I tiptoed closer, curious. The doors were slightly open, and I peeked through. There he was, Sango, standing in the middle of the grand hall, with shattered pottery at his feet. His face was red with anger, and his fists were clenched. His mother, Torosi, stood nearby, looking worried. She called out softly, "Sango, calm down." But he didn't. He yelled, "It's not fair. Why do they always look at me like I don't belong?" I didn't understand what he meant, but I could feel the tension in the air. Sango's elder brothers often teased him, calling him the fire child because of his quick temper and the strange way sparks seemed to follow him. He wasn't like the rest of them, and they made sure he knew it. Suddenly, the air felt heavy, like before a storm. A small flame flickered in Sango's hand. My eyes widened. I had never seen anything like it. Torosi rushed to him, wrapping his hands in her scarf, putting out the fire. "Sango, you must learn to control it," she whispered. "Your strength is a gift, but it can also be a curse." Sango's shoulders slumped, and the fire disappeared. He looked down, ashamed. Torosi hugged him tightly, and for a moment, everything was quiet again. I didn't tell anyone what I saw that day, but I never forgot it. That was the first time I realized Sango was no ordinary prince. Sango was different, but he was also kind. He often helped the palace workers, carrying heavy loads or chasing away wild animals that wandered too close. He had a strong sense of justice, always standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. One day, while we were playing near the river, a group of older boys from the village started picking on a smaller boy. They shoved him, calling him names. I wanted to help, but I was scared. Sango, however, didn't hesitate. He stormed over, his eyes blazing. "Leave him alone," he shouted. The older boys laughed at first, but then they saw the look in his eyes, the way his fist tightened. They backed off, muttering, and ran away. The smaller boy looked up at Sango, tears in his eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Sango smiled, patting him on the back. "No one deserves to be treated like that," he said. Word of what happened spread quickly, and soon, everyone knew not to mess with Sango or anyone under his protection. He became a hero to us kids, someone we looked up to. But Sango wasn't always happy. At home, things were more complicated. His father, the king, loved him, but the pressure of being different weighed heavily on him. His brothers never let him forget that he wasn't like them. They whispered behind his back, calling him a danger, a freak. One evening, I overheard Torosi talking to the king. She was worried about Sango, about what he was becoming. "He's just a boy," she said, "but his power, it's growing. We need to help him before it consumes him." The king nodded, his face turned. "I will send him to the best warriors and sorcerers. They will teach him control." And so, Sango was sent away, far from Oyo, to learn from the greatest minds and warriors in the land. We didn't see him for a long time, and I wondered if he would ever come back. Years passed, and life in Oyo went on. We grew older, and the memory of Sango faded into the background. But then, one day, he returned. I remember it clearly. The sky was bright, and the air was filled with the sounds of the market. Suddenly, a murmur spread through the crowd. "Sango is back," they whispered. I ran to the palace gates, pushing through the crowd to get a better look. There he was, taller, stronger, and more confident than ever. His eyes held a fire that wasn't there before, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had seen and done things we couldn't imagine. He greeted the people warmly, but there was a seriousness about him. He had come back for a reason, and we would soon find out what it was. That night, the king held a feast to celebrate Sango's return. The hall was filled with laughter and music, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Sango stood up, raising his cup. "Thank you for welcoming me back," he said. "I have traveled far and learned much. But now, it is time to take my place here, in Oyo." His brothers exchanged glances, their smiles fading. They knew what this meant. Sango wasn't just back to visit. He was here to challenge them, to claim the throne. The tension in the room was thick, and for a moment, no one spoke. Then, the king raised his hand, silencing the murmurs. "We will talk about this in the morning," he said. And with that, the feast continued, but the air was heavy with anticipation. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. The memory of Sango's first outburst, the fire in his hand, played over and over in my mind. I knew that this was only the beginning. Sango was back, and he was about to change Oyo forever.